I didn't say a word when it happened. I just smiled. That's the part people always find hard to believe when I tell this story. That I sat there, in my own restaurant, and let my sister-in-law call my daughter a charity case in front of a full dining room. That I folded my hands in my lap and said nothing. But here's what they don't understand. I've been waiting for that moment for 3 years. I wasn't going to ruin it by getting loud. Let me back up. My name is not important right now. What's important is that I'm 32 years old. I have a 9-year-old daughter named Cleo, and 18 months ago I opened a restaurant. Not a big one. 42 seats, a seasonal menu, a wine list I built myself from scratch. We're in a mid-sized city in the Pacific Northwest, close enough to the coast that we can get fresh halibut on a Tuesday morning and have it plated by 6 that evening. It took me 4 years of saving, 1 SBA loan, 2 failed business plans, and 1 very patient landlord to make it happen. Cleo is there for all of it. She sat on the floor of the empty dining room while I painted the baseboards. She helped me test the dessert menu by eating approximately 47 versions of our brown butter tart until we landed on the right one. She knows the name of every server, every line cook, every dishwasher. She calls our head chef Uncle Morris, even though he's about as related to us as the fire extinguisher by the back door. I'm telling you this because I want you to understand what that place means to us. It's not just a business. It's everything we rebuilt our lives with after my divorce. My ex-husband, I'll call him my ex because that's all he is now, left when Cleo was 6. Clean break, he called it. He had a new girlfriend within a month. He moved across the state. He sends birthday cards with no return address, which I've always found equal parts cowardly and pointless. Cleo stopped waiting for them to arrive on time around age 8. His family, though. His family stayed in the area. His older sister, I'll call her my sister-in-law even though that ship has technically sailed, is a woman named Felicity. Felicity is 40 years old, owns a very large house in the suburbs, drives an SUV with a custom license plate, and has made it her life's work to remind everyone within a 10-foot radius that she married well. Her husband is a contractor. They are comfortable. They want you to know it. Felicity has 2 daughters, twins, 11 years old, Ray and Bex. They are dressed in matching clothes at every family event, which I always found a little strange for girls their age. But that's not my business. Felicity never fully accepted the divorce. Not because she was heartbroken on my behalf. God, no. She accepted it for her brother the moment he packed his car. What she couldn't accept was that Cleo and I didn't quietly disappear. We stayed in the same city. We kept existing. We kept showing up to her mother's birthday dinners and her father's retirement party and the occasional Sunday brunch that her mother, my ex's mother, who I still genuinely love, hosted at her house. And when I opened the restaurant, something shifted in Felicity. I think she expected me to fail. I think on some level she built a small and private narrative where my ex left. I struggled. I eventually moved away, and the chapter closed. When I opened instead, when the local paper ran a tiny write-up, when we started getting reviewed on the food blogs, when her own friends started mentioning they'd eaten there and loved it, something curdled in her. She started making little comments, nothing you could really confront directly. "Oh, how nice that you have something to keep you busy. I hear the restaurant is doing okay, considering." Once, at a family gathering, she patted Cleo on the head and said, within my earshot, "Your mom works so hard, doesn't she? It must be hard not having her home more." Cleo was 8. She looked up at Felicity and said, "She's home every morning before school." I almost cried in the kitchen when Cleo told me about it later, but the real moment, the one that set everything in motion, came about 4 months ago. My ex's mother, who I'll call Grandma Bet because that's what Cleo calls her, and I've never really called her anything else, was turning 70. Bet is a good woman. Genuinely. She sends Cleo books for every birthday, calls every Sunday, has never once made me feel unwelcome, even after her own son walked out. When she asked me, quietly, if I would consider hosting her birthday dinner at the restaurant, I said yes before she finished the sentence. "I want it to be a real family dinner," she told me. "Everyone together, no fuss." I should have known that where Felicity was involved, there would always be fuss. The reservation was for 12. I had my manager, Theo. Wait, I need to use a different name. My manager, whose name I'll say is Dell, handled the front of house that evening. I wasn't going to be in the kitchen. I was going to be a guest at my own grandmother-in-law's birthday. I wore a dress I'd been saving for something. I braided Cleo's hair the way she likes, with the little gold clips along the side. We arrived early because that's who we are. Bet arrived soon after with her husband, and she hugged Cleo for a long time. Felicity arrived last with the twins and her husband. I'll call him Gary, and she walked in doing that thing she does where she assesses a room before she greets anyone in it. She looked at the table. She looked at the other guests already seated. And then she looked at me and Cleo, and something moved across her face. Not hostility exactly, something quieter, like a decision being made. We were seated family style, a long table near the window. I'd chosen that table myself. It has a view of the small herb garden I had planted in the courtyard, just lavender and rosemary and a few tomato plants. And the light in the evening comes through at an angle that makes everything look like a painting. The server, a young woman named Petra on my staff, though I hadn't introduced myself to the table as the owner, just as Cleo's mom and Bet's guest came around for drink orders. Bet ordered sparkling water. Her husband ordered the house red. Most of the table followed. When she got to Cleo, Petra smiled and asked, "And for you, sweetheart?" Before Cleo could answer, and Cleo was going to ask for the blood orange lemonade, I know because she asks for it every single time we're there. Felicity looked across the table and said, "She'll have tap water." Petra glanced at me. I kept my face still. "Oh," Petra said, "we have a few options for kids. Lemonade, sparkling. Tap water is fine," Felicity said again, and she was using the voice she uses when she considers something settled. Breezy, final. Like she was doing everyone a favor by simplifying things. Cleo looked at me. I gave her the smallest nod. Not now. Cleo folded her hands in her lap. I watched Felicity order the twins matching Shirley Temples with extra cherries. I watched her husband order a craft beer from the tap list. I watched her order a glass of the Willamette Valley Pinot Gris that was, and I know this because I priced it myself, $22 a glass. And Cleo sat there with tap water. Then the menus came. This is where it got worse, because Felicity looked at the menu and then looked at me and said, pleasantly, like she was making a helpful observation, "Cleo can share with the twins. We don't need to order separately for her." The twins looked up from their menus. They weren't cruel girls, I don't think. They were just their mother's daughters, which meant they didn't question her. One of them, Ray, I think, said, "Mom, can I get the salmon?" "Of course, sweetheart," Felicity said. "Can I get the filet?" said the other. Of course. She didn't look at Cleo. Cleo didn't say anything. She was 9 years old, and she was sitting in a restaurant she had helped paint at a birthday dinner for a woman she loved, and she was being made to feel like an afterthought by someone who had decided somewhere along the way that we were extras in a story she was the center of. I felt something settle in my chest. Not anger. Anger is hot, and this was cold, clear. The kind of feeling you get when you know exactly what is about to happen and you're just waiting for the right moment. I reached across and took Cleo's hand under the table. I squeezed once. She looked at me. I gave her the same look I always give her when things are hard and I need her to trust me. A small smile, steady, nothing dramatic. She squeezed back. There's a moment in every hard situation where you choose what kind of person you're going to be. I've had enough hard situations to know that the best choice isn't always the loudest one. Sometimes it's the one you make quietly, in advance, before anyone else has even realized the game has started. Dinner continued. The twins ordered. Gary ordered. Felicity ordered. She got the sea bass, which is the most expensive entree on the menu. She made a comment about how it's nice that the food is actually decent, to her husband, but loud enough. I watched Bet's expression flicker with discomfort. Bet leaned toward me and said softly, "You look beautiful tonight." I said, "So do you. Happy birthday." She held my hand for a second. She looked like she wanted to say something else. She didn't. The food came out. Dell, my manager, was the one who brought it to the table. He's been with me since we opened. He knows every dish, every substitution, every allergy accommodation. He's also one of the most perceptive people I've ever worked with. The kind of person who reads a table in about 15 seconds and knows everything he needs to know. He set the plates down with perfect care. The twins got their salmon and filet. Felicity got her sea bass. Everyone around the table had a full plate in front of them. Cleo had tap water. Del looked at her. Then he looked at me. It was barely a look, half a second, the kind of communication that happens between people who've worked together long enough to not need words. I gave him the smallest nod. He said to the table, "And for the young lady, we have the chef's special this evening. Our brown butter pasta with shaved summer truffle and a blood orange lemonade, compliments of the kitchen." He set both in front of Cleo. Cleo looked up at him. Her eyes went wide. "That's my favorite," she whispered. "I know," Del said. He winked at her. He moved on. There was a beat of silence at the table. Felicity set down her fork. She looked at Del's retreating back, then at Cleo's plate. The pasta, which costs $34 on the regular menu, the truffle glistening under the light, the lemonade in the tall glass Cleo always asks for. And then she looked at me. "Did you arrange that?" she said. She was keeping her voice even, but I could hear the tightness underneath it. I looked at her. "The kitchen takes care of its guests," I said. "That's very nice," she said in a tone that meant the opposite. "It is," I agreed. She went back to her sea bass. But something had shifted at the table. I could feel it. Other guests were watching or pretending not to. Bet was watching. Gary was looking at his beer. Felicity set down her fork again, this time for a different reason. She looked at the room. And I think it happened then, the thing she'd been filing away without fully connecting. The way Del moved through the space. The way the servers paused near our table. The way the kitchen had produced, within minutes, a dish that wasn't on the printed menu, specifically for a 9-year-old whose order hadn't been placed. She looked at me. "Do you know the owner?" she asked. Carefully. I took a sip of my water, set the glass down. "I am the owner," I said. The table went quiet. Not dramatically quiet. No one gasped, no silverware clattered. Just that particular stillness that falls when something true has been said and everyone present needs a moment to rearrange what they thought they knew. Felicity stared at me. I watched the calculation happen in real time, the realization that she had ordered the most expensive item on the menu and assumed it was being paid for by someone else. The realization that she had overridden the staff at their own place of work. The realization that she had told them what Cleo could and couldn't have in a room I owned. "You never said," she said finally. "You never asked," I said. Gary, to his credit, had the grace to look deeply uncomfortable. He reached for his beer and didn't say anything. That made a small sound. I think it was a laugh, though she covered it with her napkin. Felicity picked up her fork. She cut a very precise bite of sea bass. She chewed it. She did not look at me. I looked at Cleo. Cleo was eating her pasta. She'd taken the first bite with both hands wrapped around the bowl, the way she does when something is really good and she wants to feel it. She had a small smear of butter on her chin. She was completely absorbed, the way 9-year-olds can be, when food is exactly right and the world briefly reduces to just the plate in front of them. I felt something I can only describe as complete. Dinner moved on. The birthday cake came out, a flourless chocolate torte that Morris had made from a recipe he'd been refining for 2 years, with a single candle and the whole front-of-house staff singing. Bet cried a little. Her husband held her hand. Cleo clapped the loudest of anyone. Felicity ate her cake quietly. When the check came, Del placed it at the center of the table in the way we do for group reservations. Face down, no ceremony. Gary reached for it. He opened it. His expression changed in a way that was, I'll admit, briefly satisfying. He showed it to Felicity. She looked at it. She looked at me. "Is this right?" she asked. "The birthday dinner for Bet was complimentary," I said, "but the additional orders, the wine, the entrees for your family, those are itemized on the second page." She looked at the second page. The sea bass, the Pinot Gris, the twins' filet and salmon, Gary's craft beers. I had not discounted any of it. I want to be clear, I hadn't done this as a trap. I hadn't set out to humiliate her. The restaurant operates the way it operates. Guests pay for what they order. I hadn't extended her family's meal to the complimentary arrangement because she hadn't asked, and because nothing in her behavior that evening had suggested she was someone who expected generosity. But I also hadn't warned her, and I'd be lying if I said I hadn't considered, when I was setting up the reservation, that this moment might come. Gary paid. He put the card down quickly, the way men do when they want something to be over, and he didn't look at Felicity while he did it. She sat very still. After, when the table was clearing and people were gathering coats and Bet was being hugged approximately 11 times, Felicity found her way next to me. We were standing near the host stand. The restaurant hummed around us. Other tables, other evenings, the low music I'd chosen myself from a playlist I'd built over 2 years. "You could have said something earlier," she said quietly. I looked at her. "I could have," I said, "but you didn't ask. You just decided what Cleo was allowed to have." She didn't answer that. "Felicity," I said, and I kept my voice even, the same way I kept everything even all evening. "I don't know what Cleo and I represent to you, but we're not extras. We've never been extras. And every time you've tried to make us feel that way, you've been wrong." She looked at me. Something moved across her face. Not an apology, I didn't expect one. But something. A recalibration, maybe. "The food really was good," she said finally. "I know," I said. "Morris is excellent." She got her coat. She got the twins' coats. She said goodbye to Bet and she left. Bet found me by the door as the last guests were filtering out. She put both hands on my face, the way she does. She's done it since the first time I came to her house. 22 years old and completely terrified, meeting my ex's family for the first time. It's the most purely maternal gesture I've ever received from someone who isn't my own mother. "My son is an idiot," she said. "You know that." I laughed. I'd laughed at that line before. "I'm so glad you stayed," she said. "Both of you." She looked over at Cleo, who was sitting at the bar with Dell and explaining, at length, her very serious opinions about the brown butter pasta and what she would change about it. Dell was listening with the focused expression of a man who is genuinely taking notes. "I'm glad we stayed too," I said. On the drive home, Cleo was quiet for a while. She's like me that way. She processes before she speaks, turns things over before she brings them out. Finally, she said, "Did Aunt Felicity know it was your restaurant?" "Not until dinner," I said. She looked out the window. The city lights moved across the glass. "Is that why you didn't say anything when she said I could only have water?" "Yes," I said. She was quiet for another minute. "That was a pretty good plan," she said. "Thank you." Dell knew, though. Dell always knows. She smiled at the window. "The pasta was really good," she said. "Can Morris make it at home sometime? I'll ask him." She fell asleep before we got off the highway, the way she used to when she was small and we'd drive home late from something. I turned down the music and drove the rest of the way in the particular kind of quiet that only comes after something is finished. Really finished, in the way that doesn't need to be talked about or revisited. I keep thinking about what Felicity said. "You could have said something earlier." And she was right. I could have. I could have announced myself the moment she walked in. I could have stopped her before the drink order. I could have made the whole evening about who I was and what I'd built. But Cleo needed to see something different. She needed to see that when someone tries to make you small, you don't have to get loud. You don't have to fight. You just have to wait and trust yourself and let the truth arrive on its own timeline. I've spent 3 years building something real in a city where someone wanted me to disappear. I'd spent 3 years showing my daughter that starting over isn't the same as losing, that the people who call you an extra are usually just afraid of finding out you're the main character. The restaurant opens again tomorrow at 5. Morris will be there at 2 to start prep. Dell will have the floor ready by 4:30. Cleo will call after school to see if she can come in before closing. And if Felicity ever makes a reservation, if she ever walks through that door again, sits at one of my tables, orders from my menu, I'll have someone bring her a glass of sparkling water with lemon, compliments of the kitchen. Because that's who I am, and she should probably know that by now. I thought about that evening a lot since it happened, not obsessively. I don't lose sleep over Felicity, and I never did. But I think about it the way you think about something that finally confirmed what you'd suspected for a long time. Like a diagnosis that's actually a relief, because at least now you know what you're dealing with. What Felicity did that night wasn't new. She'd been doing a version of it for years. Small corrections, quiet dismissals, the steady low hum of someone reminding you that you are tolerated, not wanted. The difference was that this time, she did it to Cleo. And she did it in my building, at my tables, with my staff standing 3 feet away. I think about the choices we make when we have power over someone who doesn't know it yet. Felicity had what she thought was the upper hand all evening. She was the one who'd always had money, always had the bigger house, always been the one the family turned to. In her version of events, I was the divorced woman who'd scraped together a small restaurant and was lucky to still be included in family gatherings. She ordered her sea bass and her $22 glass of wine, and she told my daughter to drink tap water, and she felt completely comfortable doing it. That's the part that stays with me. Not the arrogance. Arrogance is ordinary. What stays with me is the comfort, the ease of it, the way she didn't hesitate for even a second before deciding what Cleo was allowed to have. Some people move through the world that way, dividing everyone they meet into those who count and those who don't. And they do it so automatically they probably don't even notice they're doing it anymore. But here's what I've learned, slowly, through years of building something from nothing while someone watched and waited for me to fail. The people who are quickest to assign you a rank are usually the ones most afraid of what happens when the rankings change. Cleo saw everything that night. She's 9, not 4. She understood more than I would have liked. She felt the sting of being handed tap water while her cousins picked steaks off a menu. I know she did, because she asked about it on the drive home with that particular careful tone she uses when she's trying to figure out if she's allowed to be hurt. And what I hope she took from it, what I tried to show her, is that you don't answer that kind of treatment with anger. You answer it with patience, with preparation, with the quiet confidence of someone who has done the work and doesn't need to announce it. I didn't open that restaurant to prove anything to Felicity. I opened it because Cleo and I needed something that was ours. Something we'd built, not been given. Something that couldn't be taken away by a man who left, or a family that decided we were extras. But I'd be lying if I said there wasn't something deeply satisfying about the moment she looked around that dining room and finally understood where she was sitting. The choices we make over years add up to something. The years I spent saving instead of spending, planning instead of giving up, showing up for Cleo even when I was exhausted and scared and not entirely sure the whole thing was going to work. Those weren't dramatic moments. There were no turning points, no single nights that changed everything. Just a long string of ordinary decisions made by someone who decided that her daughter deserved to watch her mother build something real. That's what I want Cleo to carry. Not the satisfaction of Felicity's face when the bill came. Not the twist. Not the reveal. The years before it. The painting of the baseboards. The 47 versions of the brown butter tart. The decision, made quietly and alone, to keep going anyway. That's the whole story. Everything else is just the ending.